Welcome one and all to episode number 42 of Endless Conversation Loop. Today is July 4th, 2025, and no, this will not be a very America-centric episode just because it's on the holiday. My name is Brandon, and I'm here talking with my mildly groggy co-host.
This is Boom. I'm very tired.
Yeah, schedules have been a little weird this week. We were going to record last week, but it was just like calendar stuff. Future you, the listener, would miss more episodes if we recorded last week. It'll make more sense in the future, so we decided to record today, but also it's inconvenient for your schedule, isn't it?
My whole schedule coming up, moving forward in the next few weeks is going to be a little wonky, but we're going to keep as best we can on making sure, because we're halfway through the year and we're about halfway through the number of podcasts that we're shooting for, which is 25, 26. So, it's going to be a little bit of a weird situation moving forward, but Brandon and I have already started to kind of plot ahead for the next coming weeks too, with some other topics that we've kind of been ping-ponging back and forth in a way. So we're making it work with what we got, but yeah, we have this week's podcast, which it's Brandon's turn to pick, but Brandon had something he wanted to kind of go over first.
Yeah.
So Brandon, you can take the reins here while I shuffle my 78th Magic deck that I have made, apparently.
Maybe take a nap, if you're Mr. Sleepy today. We do try to keep the show at least somewhat topically relevant here and there. We're not necessarily a news show, but when stuff that's interesting, that's new, happens to pop up, I also think it's worth discussing. So listeners may remember, because it's not like we haven't brought it up 30 billion times. A month ago, I became an owner of a certain game for a certain new game system. And that would be Mario Kart World. And so last week, the game received an update that has left some players very displeased, which I must say, I don't entirely share that opinion. There are some parts of that opinion that I do share. There are other parts of it that I'm like, come on, this really isn't that big of a deal. You just don't like change. So in earlier versions of the game, which, we're on 1.1.2, so there's been barely any updates to the game. People have been kind of I don't really like driving between places. And that's a fine opinion to hold. I know the way I was inflecting that comment, it sounds like I'm, trying to make fun of them, which I am a little bit. I think this is a little bit silly because for a few reasons that I'll outline here. So when people play it online, it works a lot like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. When you play Mario Kart 8 Deluxe online, the game gives you 3 tracks. It just picks 3 tracks, and random is your 4th option. If you're like, I don't really want to play, I don't know, Grumble Volcano, because that's a sucky track like we talked about last time. And then the other 2 options you're kind of on. You can just pick random, and it'll pick a totally random other track from the game. And part of what people liked in online play in previous versions was because they're kind of I don't care for the races where you drive to places. So I remember explaining the way Grand Prix work now. The first race of a Grand Prix is 3 laps, like we've been playing for the last 33 years. And then the remaining races, the first 2 quote-unquote laps of the race, are 2 sections of driving to that next track. And then the final lap is a proper single lap around the location that is that track, right? But if you picked random in previous versions, the game would always just pick a random track, and it would always be 3 laps, full stop. But now in the new update, the way it works is a little bit different. So basically, the randomly chosen track, it's a little bit hard to explain without the visual here. So when you enter the lobby, and it's time to pick a track. Instead of having like the menu where it's just like 3 selections, the game continues you off from the previous track that players raced on. So every track is laid out in the world, right? Hence it being the world. So like there's a whole world map that shows like, here's where this track is. Here's where that one is. Here's where that one is. And it's, all in relation to each other. So if the lobby last raced on Toad's Factory, that's kind of like the northwestern-ish portion of the map, it has connecting routes to a bunch of other tracks. So like it has a connecting route to Choco Mountain. It has a connecting route to Wario Stadium. It has a connecting route to, I'm pretty sure it has one to Bowser's Castle. And, a bunch of other ones too. So when the game lists as like it'll pick either 3 connecting routes, or it'll pick 2 connecting routes as your next options, or 1 track way off somewhere else where you'll race 3 laps on it, and random. So if you're playing Toad's Factory and the connecting route you want is Choco Mountain, the way you'll play it is if you were like in a Grand Prix and you're racing 2 sections from Toad's Factory to Choco Mountain, with the last lap being a lap of Choco Mountain. Does it kind of make sense so far?
Yeah.
Okay. But I will say, like I just pointed out, sometimes those options include a 3-lap track, so that's still there. And even then, when the game picks random, it's like the whole controversy is now that random is now changed such that you're not guaranteed a 3-lap track. It will pick as well among options that connect to the previous track. That's where the bulk of the controversy is. Because people liked having a guaranteed way to just like, I want to play laps. All right? And I don't happen to disagree with them on it. But, part of why I disagree with them is like, well, you can still get lap-based races. The game can still pick, when you have your like visible options, you can have 3-lap races. And at the end of the day, the whole thing is based on a roulette of players in the first place. So if you're in a lobby and people have picked connecting routes and it lands in a connecting route, that's just not a change. Like, do I sound crazy here?
I wouldn't say you sound crazy. I think for my point of view on this one is it's just, there's certain things about this where it's just like, oh, we're complaining about this. And I'm kind of like sitting there like, now, mind you, I am someone who does not have that same level of like, oh, well, I'm mad about this. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, well, I haven't played the game yet, so I don't have like any point of context, I guess, with this.
You have no frame of reference.
Yeah.
So, well, yeah, because I mean, if you'd played the game and you experienced these, maybe you would come out of it being like, yeah, I don't think these are as good either, and that's fine. I think there's a place for like both types of tracks, right? What I will say is annoying though to me. I didn't notice this as much at first, and I kind of glossed over this because people brought it up, and so I will certainly take the L for like glossing over this at first until like I really truly noticed it. What I do find annoying about the change to random, honestly, it has to do more with it being called random. I almost wish it were referred to as like don't care, because oftentimes what the game lands on for random is like, okay, you're basically saying, I don't care between either of these connections or that 3-lap track that was listed, so it just picks one of those. I still have had it land on truly random tracks where it's like, well, this one wasn't on the menu at all, but I guess, in my mind, if my options were to go from Toad's Factory to Choco Mountain or Wario Stadium, or go somewhere way off to, like, DK Pass, and I was like, yeah, I'd be fine with any of these, I just don't care, and that's what it said, that would make more sense. If I'm picking random, it's because I'm trying to say, I don't care for any of these options, I want something totally different. I'd rather have it land on some other track that maybe I don't care for, but it isn't one of these ones that happens to be visible to me. So, is that kind of a nitpick? Sure, but I don't think I'm asking for too much with that later. Or with that. And admittedly, I'm not necessarily using the most fair example, because as it turns out, Toad's Factory has the most connections in the game, so like that was the one that I wrote down here when I was writing my notes. It's just like I just need to pick out a random track, and that's the one that it landed on. So, but
Right.
and I will also say, most of your tracks like on the edges of the map, like one of the tracks on the southern end is Koopa Troopa Beach. Okay, well that one doesn't have as many connections because the game doesn't go any further south, so it can only pick from the 3 other directions. Whereas like if you have something that's kind of in the middle of the map, then you can have tracks that it connects to from all 4 directions in any which way. So with that, like, I can definitely also see, like, in random, I think it should have a greater chance of, like, picking a separate 3-lap race. Because, if a track only has, like, 4 or 5 connections and you're already using up 3 of them, it just seems a little like, why even pick the other connection at that point?
Right.
Like I said, some people are upset about the randomization. I'm upset about like the kind of change the randomization itself. But the bulk of the critique is like having to play connections. And last time when we talked about tracks, I talked about like one of the things that's satisfying in races like Berlin Byways or like the Booster Course Pass version of Shroom Ridge. That was a track I never thought about in Mario Kart DS. And then it became one of my favorites in Mario Kart 8 because I can do a lot of those satisfying turns that I talked about, those satisfying drifts. But, when you have routes that are closer to straight lines, you don't have that. So you need to find other ways to get satisfaction out of them. So like for me, it's been a lot of like trying to get to high speeds, using items to like cut through grass and just get past the competition, right? And, even though there are many like straight routes, they still have hills, they still have ramps. One of them, you literally are like driving along like through the waterfall so you can fall off the side on the waterfall. Like, there's still boost panels out there. You can go off the beaten path to like get, there aren't just item boxes. There are these dash food bags, and that's what transforms you into like other costumes for the character and such. So like you can go out of your way for that. So like, it's kind of a misnomer when people critique these to be like, no, they're just like flat, empty roads. Like they've got hills, they've got elevation, they've got other stuff you can do on them. And it's okay if you don't find that satisfying. We just have, we have to be accurate in how we're describing these too. And, at the end of the day, what I see for a lot of like, there's kind of 2 camps on this. There's like the casual critique where it's just like, I just don't find it fun. And it's like, that I think that's a more reasonable critique. When it comes to like the high level players, they're like, well, this really encourages like, the most optimal strategy then for this is like, they just call it bagging, which is in reference to sandbagging. And that was, funnily enough, kind of the same thing in Mario Kart 8, where it's like, well, the optimal strategy is just like, stay toward the back of the pack to get the really good items. And then by the time you get to the end, that's when you really like, you use those and you're like good skills navigating the track to get to the top. And I'm sorry, but like if your version of high level play is to sandbag, for one thing, that's really your own fault for making the game less fun for yourself, because you could be just playing at the high, like with your high level of knowledge of the track along the way from the beginning. And also, there's a lot of sports that consider sandbagging cheating. You and I both like to play a round of golf here and there, right? It's considered a pretty major sin if you're like a pro golfer to like hide your maximum power, so to speak, right?
Right. Like, when you're playing golf, it's like you typically are like wanting to put your best effort into every shot when the time comes, particularly when you're driving, or say if you're in the rough and you like are still ways away from like the green and whatnot. Sandbagging in a golf case would be like, oh, I'm just not gonna hit it nearly as hard because, like, where's the challenge or something stupid like that. Maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I don't golf, like, religiously by any stretch, but I do, and so when I go, like, I'm trying to put my best, foot forward with it. So, yeah, I get your point for sure, though.
I'd think of it a little bit more like this. It's like, well, I mean, I know how I can shoot it out into the fairway here, but like, because like there's a very key difference between like you end up in the rough because you're trying and you're not very good, versus like you're trying to play worse so that when the time for the big competition comes, you show how good you really are, right? And you just land in bad places intentionally. So that's kind of my point here. Is it's like,
It's almost like hustling, basically, is how I'm hearing it.
Right. Like, if the best way to victory is hide in the back and then end up in the front later because you're trying to, like, you're sandbagging, right? I don't know that that's necessarily something that should be encouraged. And it's hard to judge that too, because you can get Mario Karted, as they say. You can get some lucky items and just end up in front. I've had many races where it's like I've run the gamut from like, okay, I'm in third, and like, oh well, now I guess I'm back in like 19th place, and then by the end it's like I end up in 5th or 6th. Like, there's not one easy way to judge that. And the game does try to do a couple things to mitigate the problem, but they're not nearly as effective as I think the developers thought they would be. But either way, my point on that is like, maybe the problem isn't that the track is bad. Maybe the problem is your mindset is more like on, here's how I win this, as opposed to here's how I have fun with this. And that's fine if if your thing is to be competitive, but like, I can't help you if you're intentionally trying to suck the fun out of it for the sake of winning, right?
Oh, right.
And I think where I find myself upset here too is because I'm finding myself once again arguing with people that I agree with. Because really the whole thing is people are just kind of making a bigger deal out of this, I think, than it really is. Like when I play single player, my beloved versus race that's not in Mario Kart 7, I'm usually picking just like, all right, I'm just going to pick the lap-based race because kind of like in online, you don't have like a menu of races like you had when it's like, okay, Mushroom Cup, Shell Cup, Banana, Special, whatever. Instead, you have like a cursor on the whole world map, and you can hover that over any track that you want. You can pick it. And then when you select it, there's a whole little sub-menu, but it's a little confusing. And so I've just kind of found myself defaulting to the top option because the top option is just regular lap race. Whereas all the other options use that track that you've selected not as the destination, but as the starting line. And I think that's kind of backwards. Because if I'm picking, that's a good example, if I'm picking DK Pass, it's because I want to play DK Pass. So it doesn't make sense to me to have, like I vaguely get the logic of like you've selected it, but like I'm not selecting it as the starting line. I want to select it as the destination because that's what I want to play. I don't want to drive from DK Pass to this other place. I want to drive from this other place that's listed in the list and end at DK Pass. Again, It might be one of those things that's hard to visualize without having experienced it.
Well, I feel like part of it is like I'm also kind of, in my perspective, I'm kind of hearing a old man yells at cloud situation, for lack of a better phrase. And it's not like what you're trying to get at, it's more like what other people are trying to get at. It's like, I feel like in general what it comes down to is people are going to complain about things that they don't like because like I'm going to be honest here. When you said it's like, oh yeah, it's like we've been doing this for like the last 30 years with Mario Kart. I'm like, oh my god, Mario Kart is 33 years old.
1992.
It's as old as I am almost, and I'm just like, oh god. But like, I think when you have something like this that has had like kind of this constant way of doing things for as long as they have, and like now people are complaining because it's like they try something new. I think it's like no matter what you try to do is like the new thing for it, it's like there's going to be some growing pains no matter what. So when I say that, like, it's like, oh yeah, old man yelling at cloud situation, it's just kind of like, it's people are going to complain no matter what it is, and that's just sort of the end all be all, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, because it's like if they're gonna complain about the game, they're gonna find whatever to complain about.
Yeah.
Like, and you can kind of expand that outside of even this case. It's like any game that they don't dub as like their own personal 10 out of 10 will like nitpick it to high hell, and it's like that no game is gonna be perfect in any capacity, and like it's still early. We've had it for what, a month?
It will be exactly a month tomorrow.
Right. So like let them kind of figure out the growing pains with it, and it's like if it is that big of an issue, more people will speak out on it, and hopefully Nintendo listens. But
Right.
I don't know. Maybe this is just one of those things where I'm just kind of like sitting there shaking my head from my front porch, going,
Well, right, and I haven't gotten that. That's kind of like the last part of this, where it's like, it's not like there's no smoke for Nintendo on this, because there is. While I think that this change doesn't ruin my enjoyment of playing online, the solutions to this are so mind-bogglingly obvious that it's just like, oh, Nintendo, why aren't you doing these? Like, I've seen people talk about, like, well, why don't they do, like, instead of have it be race online, there's like connected race or like rally race or however you want to do it, and then like traditional race or whatever. Why isn't it like a toggle? One of the ideas I thought of is like, well, maybe they could do it kind of like Splatoon. Splatoon has it where they periodically change the maps every couple hours. Maybe it could be like, during this period of time, it'll be just lap races. During this period of time, it'll be just connection races. Or like the one that I landed on that I was like, no, I think this is probably the solution is, because you already can have it where the game picks, all right, here are 2 connections from this location you started at, and then here's 1 lap-based track way off in the distance, and random. Just have that be the option every single time, because then the only way, if someone is like, still up in arms about like, I don't want to play connections, the only way they have to play them is if other people picked those options and that's what the roulette landed on. Then like it's basically just the same as it's ever been, because in Mario Kart 8, because I was the only one that ever did this 3 tracks and random, because we in 7 did like, yeah, you can pick whatever, and then it does the roulette. At that point, then you're just at the mercy of like the roulette, and if tons of people prefer the lap-based tracks, and then so it's like, you have a room of 18 and 12 of them picked the lap, and 2 people picked random, and then 3 people picked one connection, and the last person picked the other. Okay, then it's all just up to chance anyway. So I just don't, like, I can't give them no fault on this, because it's just like, this didn't have to be an issue. We could have just, like, this, there's so many ways to, like, not have this be an issue, and certainly they couldn't predict that people might get up in arms about I guess there is an extent to which they could have predicted it, because people don't like change, but, I think the devs thought maybe people would be more open to it being a change, and even then, I also, for as much as I'm, like, giving smoke to these, like, people who are upset about this, at the end of the day, my assumption is outcry like this is the same thing that got us, like, when the Booster Course Pass was announced and people are like, there isn't enough value here, and then suddenly, like, oh, we're going to do things like people who didn't like the Shy Guys Coconut Mall, we're going to change them, and then they're going to do the donuts, and instead of just sitting there, all right, we're going to keep up in the graphics with each wave that we can, we're going to have a toggle for items, we're going to add new characters, we're going to add new Mii costumes, like, all that comes, at least in part, because people are upset about it. So I don't want people to stop being mad about it. I'm just saying, like, I think the argument should be more, like, positive, more like, hey, can we make this change, as opposed to, like, let's make a meme about how, like, the game is ruined, and I won't play online anymore, especially because, man, gamers are really good at kidding themselves. Gamers have this tendency to be like, I'm going to do this thing, and then it just doesn't happen, and then the change that they want doesn't happen, and then people just move on. So that's where I am with this right now. Shall we move on to the main topic, or do you have any more questions or comments on this that you find interesting?
I love how it's like, we're like 30 minutes into the episode, and we haven't even gotten to the main topic yet.
That's okay. 30 minutes is like my maximum target for these intro-y topics.
Well, I'll be honest. I mean, I get the frustration from your perspective, at least. As someone who still doesn't have a Switch 2 and probably won't for the foreseeable future, I think my stake and my comments on a lot of this is going to not really matter too much in the long run. So, I don't know. I mean, I definitely sympathize, don't get me wrong. But, like, I guess I just don't have as much stake in it, so it's really hard for me to really want to carry the pitchforks.
Yeah.
Where I'm more just like, man, I'm, like, playing stuff, like, right now on my PS5. So, like, I'm playing single-player games at the moment. So, like, all this multiplayer stuff, it's like, man, I don't really have a care on this right now. It's not like how it was when I was like constantly playing like League of Legends and Valorant and these games that like there'd be these changes almost like bi-weekly to the point of it would be like, oh, the so and so character is like completely ruined. They ruined the game. Blah 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 blah. It's just like everyone's just blowing up for no reason whatsoever about them trying to do something different to make the game more like not the same samey all over again. Now I know that's like kind of a different like scenario, but like the general idea I feel like is in that same breath.
I would agree, yeah. I guess long story short, I'm mad at everybody except for the people who are just like dissatisfied with the game. If you don't like the game, like I saw I just watched a ton of YouTube videos and I saw like a post from, some, not like giant, not like tiny creator. And he's just like, I was going to do a review on the game, but I don't really care for it, is what I've concluded. Like the whole thing, and the update just made it worse. And I don't really want to do a review that's just like, this game sucks, so I'm just going to move on. And it's like, you know what? If you don't like the game, that's fine. I really don't have a problem with people that like the game. I have no stake in that. My stake is just in like, if you want something changed, be effective in making your change. And that goes for everything. That goes for games. That goes for politics. That goes for like social issues, which I guess, is also politics. I don't know. I can't think of a good third example, but you see my point here. If you want to make a change, I don't think the best way to do it is just to like get all like everything's ruined, everything's rah. It's to like be like, hey, this isn't good. Here's some ideas on how we could fix this. And maybe that aggressive approach I think makes more sense in some other context. I just don't think this is one of them. So that's where we are. Let's move on to the main topic today. It is my choice again, so man, we're gonna have a lot of me in this episode. I wanted to.
I'm just here.
You're the peanut gallery right now, but you'll get some time in the spotlight. Don't worry. This will get a little more balanced now as time goes on. And I wanted to talk about surprising like game ports or surprising just like versions of games that where you look at them and you're like, that exists? So, when the time came to decide on an episode topic, it either comes really easy where like we could have made the topic for the episode we just talked about for the last 30 minutes. But other times it ends up being really hard, and I'm just like, I don't really know what I want to do. So I find myself puzzling over, like, what do I do for this? So, like, then I'll be like, I'll look at my bank of topics that I have, like, on my list, and if something doesn't speak to me in that, then it's like, okay, well, let me look around in my library and see what piques my curiosity. What, like, can I pull a topic from with that game? And one of the games that I own got me thinking about how it's like, it's kind of weird if you think about it, that this even exists at all. Like, really? There were developers who decided to make this version of a game? So it's not like the game itself, the original version of the game, makes sense to exist, and I will explain that shortly. But this particular version I'm going to point out was just like, that's like, huh. And to be clear, when I say a game is like surprising, like, oh, that's interesting, that this is kind of like, when we had our historical negationism or like our revisionism topic here, like when I say surprising, that's not like I'm saying it's bad, okay? Just so that we're clear here, like if anyone's a huge defender of any of these games we're going to be talking about, I'm not saying they're bad, I'm just saying I'm like, in retrospect, it's surprising that exists. And one of the two options, like ideally we have like two options, or like two examples each here of like surprising game versions, but considering, like you said, it's like, man, we're 30 minutes in and we haven't already talked about the main topic, maybe we'll shelve the other two for a later time. It certainly doesn't hurt to revisit this, but I know for sure we're going to at least do one each. And of all the games that got me thinking, of all the video games I own, the one that got me thinking is Pac-Man Party 3D.
What a deep cut of a choice that you are running with for this.
Yep. It makes sense, though. You kind of have to go for the deep cuts if you're saying it's surprising that it exists, because it's just a little bizarre, right? It's very off the beaten path. So, what is this game? So, in 2010, A certain yellow puck-shaped character named Pac-Man turned 30 years old. And if you don't feel old yet, which I know you do when you mentioned, like, oh man, I'm a little older than Mario Kart. Pac-Man's 45 this year.
Dude, my walker is literally like right next to me, and I'm just sitting here, and I'm like, oh no, just why? Why must we have reminders of how old some of these franchises are?
Can we just not celebrate birthdays anymore? It's making me feel ancient.
The anniversary was like the worst way to keep track of like how old a game is, because it's just like, oh, it's the 35th anniversary of so and so. Like, we have the 30th anniversary of Pokemon coming up. Oh my god.
Yeah. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, that feels like a relatively newer series. You know, next year...
But 30 years is a long time,
No, I know. I can remember thinking in, like, 2011, seeing, like, oh, Sonic the Hedgehog's 20 years old. And it's like, wow, that's 20 years old? And then now we're approaching next year, where it will be, it should be 35 next year, right?
I'm like turning into dust as we keep going on this.
So back to the main topic, though. We kind of derailed on talking about how anniversaries are kind of scary sometimes here.
Just for the old man over here.
Yeah. It's okay. You make jokes about me being young, so I can make old jokes, I guess.
Yes, you'll be laughing at my grave when I die later.
Come on, I'm not that cruel. So what's this game? Of all the things that Bandai Namco could be like, how do we celebrate Pac-Man turning 30? I know, Mario Party clone. That's not exactly accurate. Like, I mean, it's a party game. But it doesn't play exactly like Mario Party. So, like, you got your board, you got your 4 players, right? Okay, tracking so far. Instead of like collecting stars, you have to collect cookies, which is, I mean, it's just they're the dots, right? And you need to get back to the starting space with like the target total of cookies. So the boards are like linear, and then you can get your cookies either through like board events. You know, you like there's this one. Like there's a couple spaces where it's like this fancy pants golden looking mansion on the board, and you just get to pick from 4 boxes, and either way you get some bonus of like, hey, here's some free cookies, right? And then there are other ones, like there's ones that like warp you around the board, ones that give you negative effects. If you land on an empty space, you can build a castle, and if you like land on the next one directly next to it, like you can expand your castle and up until it's like this giant 5-space hulking beast of a building. You can get them through mini games and such. And what's actually interesting about the mini games is, unlike Mario Party, they don't happen at the end of every turn, and you can actually have it be where you can play multiple mini games back to back to back, because they happen when an opponent lands on your castle. So like if Pac-Man owns castle and Inky lands on it, at the end of that turn, you'll play a minigame. I should have also added, everyone moves at the same time. So at the start of your turn, there's like a little micro game that you play, and that's how you get like everyone's like, oh, Pac-Man moves 4, Inky moves 8, Blinky moves 2, and Pinky moves 7, or whatever. But like, if you land on someone else's castle, there's almost like a dual minigame going on within the 4-player minigame, because the player who landed on the castle is attacking, so they're trying to steal the castle, and the player who owns it is defending. So like those two are really competing, but the other two are there, and they can still like just get cookies out of having won the minigame. So it's really kind of like, I like that. That's kind of interesting. But I mean, the actual board game itself beyond that is like, I mean, it's okay. But yeah, I mean, you put that all together, that sounds like a great game to put on the Wii, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You know, probably not an Xbox 360 title, probably not a PS3 title, but like, that's perfect Wii fodder.
I mean, you could have made an argument for 360. They had like Fusion Frenzy and stuff like that. It's not like it wasn't a stranger to party games.
That's absolutely true, but I'm just saying it's like, you know, it fits in, like it just makes sense on the Wii.
Right.
And I mean, on top of that, you know, the devs did all the things that you want to do to like make it a Wii game. You use the motion controls for a ton of the mini games. You use the pointer. And I mean, it's easy to get 4 people together for it because it's like, who didn't have a Wii? Okay, just bring your Wii remote to my place and we'll play the game, you know? It's very easy for that. Which then begs the question, of course, in this surprising version, a year later, why did it need a 3DS version?
You know, I wish I had an answer. Like,
that's just weird, isn't it?
yeah. Like, I feel like handheld systems, when it comes to party games, they don't quite translate as well as, like, you know, a Mario Party or even, like, any of, like, those Mario Party type of clone ones. Because, like, there's so much requirement for that game to really be, like, a usable experience, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. Because it's like, if you're putting it on 3DS, that basically means, like, if you're playing, say, even a 4-player game, you now need, like, 4 3DSs, effectively. That you all own this game, no less, in potential cases. That's just so much work.
Right, there's tons more setup. And, you know, I am a humongous defender of Mario Party DS. I think I've talked about this like in passing a couple times before, but like one of my theories is with Mario Party specifically, whichever one you play first is your favorite. Doesn't matter which one it is. It could be the worst game in the series, but you played it first. Therefore, that one is the one you will love. Period. No questions asked. For me, that was Mario Party DS. And they did a really good job of mitigating that because obviously, if you own the game, you probably own a DS. It'd be very strange to own a DS game without owning a DS or without any intent to own a DS. And everything in that game that could be multiplayer is playable with just that one copy of the game. So the barrier to entry is much lower because you just need to know another person or a few people with DSs. And that's certainly still not as easy as like, you know, maybe you can own multiple controllers, or you can ask a friend to bring a controller or two. Like, the barrier to entry is still a little bit higher, but, you know, it's not as hard of a mountain to climb as it looks like at first. And again, I mean, it's pretty much the whole game. You can play all the boards, you can play all the mini games, there's side modes, there's even exclusive download play only 2-player modes. Like, they went all out with that. But Pac-Man Party 3D is not. Okay, they did not do that. In fact, in single player, well, I mean, not just in single player, but just in the entire game, they cut out 2 of the boards from the Wii version. And there were only 5 boards in the Wii version of the game. So now, in the 3DS version, you're down to 3 boards. And, you know, where I can give them credit is, like, you know, with the mini games, they did a really good job of trying to translate them. It's like, okay, we can use the gyro for some of these. We can use the touchscreen for some of these. On that front, they did a pretty good job, but there's so many little other things with that are compromised. You know, like the characters, like they don't emote at all. The big one, kind of like we were just talking about, everyone, if you want to play a proper multiplayer game of the game, everyone needs a copy, because the only download play stuff is, well, you can play a couple mini games, I guess. And that's not nearly as fun. So, I mean, it's like, it's an okay version of the game, but, you know, when you're making something that's so severely compromised, it starts to beg the question, well, why even make it in the first place?
I feel like that comment and question right there is kind of gonna really explain the general vibe of this episode. It's like, why was this even needed to be made?
Right, and that's not, you know, denigrating the developers' work. They did the best that they could. To me, it's just more a question of, like, when we were doing a proposal for this idea, did we really think through the logic of it? And in this case, it's like it came out about a year or so later than the Wii version, and, you know, the Wii game only sold like 600,000 copies. So you're taking one of the best-selling game consoles of all time and making a late in the generation for it, exclusive game for it, on top of people already in 2010 being kind of like mostly done with the Wii. So it's not surprising that it sold like only 600,000 units. So now you're going to make a version of the game on a handheld that just came out, and it also wasn't very high in demand in the first place. So that one only sold, like the 3DS version only sold 150,000 copies. So it's just like the whole thing just doesn't make sense. Like, for what it is, I think it's just kind of a funny game to own. Like, it's clearly like a bargain bin kind of game. But if I have the choice of playing the 3DS version or playing the Wii version, unless I'm really like adamant about, I just want to use some button controls and, I don't care that I can't play these other boards. It's like, well, why wouldn't I just play the Wii version? So just a very surprising game to exist, but I can't be mad at anyone. It's just, I just go, weird. What is your first example? Like, what comes to your mind when you think of, like, that's a game?
So, kind of researching into this topic earlier, like, something I've learned is that there are a multitude of weird ports of games and stuff like that. And I think part of it was, like, the actual definition of what a, like, weird port is. Because, like, when we were initially talking about this, I immediately thought of, like, the Call of Duty games on, like, the Nintendo DS, like, that kind of thing. But I don't know if I can necessarily fully qualify that as, like, what we're trying to aim for on here. Like, it does, but it doesn't. But, like, I was, like, finding some of the weirdest possible things. Like, do you know there's an iOS port of BioShock?
I did not know that. But
I only just learned that.
I think that kind of fits closer to the COD on DS, though. But it is still surprising. Those two kind of ride the line.
Yeah, and it's like, I know that there are some games that do have, like, an iOS port, or, like, they're on, like, mobile devices and stuff like that. Because, like, certain ones, like, like, we're no stranger to, Ace Attorney, and, like, there are versions of that game for, mobile, and they run surprisingly well from, like, what I've seen. I think it was the 5th game or something. I forget which one it was. But, like, I played, like, the first chapter of it, like, as a demo on my iPhone years ago. It ran surprisingly well. So I'm like, oh, yeah, cool. Like, it's Ace Attorney. It's not, like, anything super graphically intensive or anything. But the one that I'm talking about first is another Wii game that I, just for lack of a better question, simply, who is this for? Who asked for this? And that was Dead Rising Chop Till You Drop.
Folks, this is going to be a very Wii-centric episode, if you
To be fair, that is, like, the console that had probably the weirdest ports imaginable. And all the research I was kind of, like, digging into this, it's like I kept seeing the Wii mentioned over and over again. And I wanted to talk about this one specifically because this is one that I keep seeing in, like, our local retro store, like, fairly often. It's not that, like, I'm saying, like, it's a super bad port by any stretch of the imagination. I think it's the fact that, like, so to kind of give context, when the original Dead Rising came out, like the OG one, it was more done in a way to kind of be more of, like, a graphical showcase in some cases, where it's like, here's what the Xbox 360 can handle. And, like, that's why the game was so good, because it was, like, it had all this stuff going on. It was able to hold, like, literally, like, dozens to, like, hundreds of zombies on the screen in one go. And then being able to, like, showcase, like, the power of what the 360 in particular, I'm sure, was, like, actually capable of. So someone at Nintendo said, we could probably do that. And it turns out, no, they couldn't. Because the Wii and the Xbox 360 are, like, so far different in terms of what they're going for here. So, something I was kind of, like, the more I was, like, kind of leaning into it was the actual Wii version of this game, just, they don't have that many zombies by comparison. If I had to make an assumption, if you put, like, 100 zombies on the screen for the 360 version, the Wii could probably handle maybe, at best, 20.
I feel like it is leagues different in terms of how much it can handle. And then there's the problem of like some of these changes that they do to kind of, I want to say, differentiate itself from the original, but like I don't know if that's necessarily the right word, as more of the, well, we can only do so much, so we're gonna just try to do this and hope for the best that it'll, like, no one will pick up on it, is how I feel it was kind of there. Like, there's the weird third-person camera angle. Like, I know the original has, like, it's third-person, but it's not, like, the RE4 type of third-person. But there would be points where, like, it kind of goes into that RE4 camera person, or the camera, like, over-the-shoulder style with it. And it just feels weird for a Dead Rising game. Like, it works in RE4 because that was where it was designed. But then seeing it in another game, like, and it's only, like, here and there that it does it, feels off. And then there was, like, way more focus on guns, I found out. Because, like, it's the Wii, which makes sense, because they really wanted to showcase a lot of the motion controls and stuff like that. But in a way, it kind of loses the essence of what Dead Rising's, like, more creative elements were. When you're able to make these weapons, like, out of certain things. But the Wii version more just kind of, like, really dumbs it down a little bit to the point of, like, oh, we're not going to try to really get elaborate with the weapons. It's like, yeah, we've got primarily guns. Like, you can still use some other stuff that, like, you know, works, like shopping carts and all that stuff. But, like, it really loses a bit of, like, that flavor that Dead Rising really has been for the better part of how many, like, what, 2 decades now? So, I don't know, just the Wii version is such a drop in quality, too. And I have more things, but I kind of want to hear your opinion on what you're thinking here. Because I've kind of been rambling about just that there's so much to unpack with that game. Like, it is a wonder that this got made.
Well, I have to say, it is very late 2000s to early 2010s Capcom. Because they did similar things too. Like, there were a couple Resident Evil spin-offs that were on the Wii that were very, like, in that same kind of way, very, like, almost more like light gun shooter type games as opposed to, horror games.
I'm very familiar with those. I own both of them.
Right, see? But those, I mean, they make a little bit more sense. I can conceive on paper the idea of, like, why would a Dead Rising game on the Wii be interesting? Especially with the motion controls. Like, okay, sure, guns to point the screen for shooting the zombies. That's fine, but how many games where you just point at the screen and shoot are there on the Wii? A lot of them. So, if anything, it feels a little bit more disappointing that they don't do more with the weird and wacky weapons, because I'd almost, like, want tons of melee weapons, just so that it's like you've got a ton of different motions and, like, all kinds of different ways that you can just mow down a horde of zombies, because that's a big part of what makes the game interesting.
Right, and, like, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I guess the thing that doesn't surprise me is, like, some of those, like, compromises for the game. More missions instead of it being open. Okay, well, the Wii, compared to the 360 and the PS3, very underpowered system. So trying to bring a game like that to the Wii doesn't surprise me that they just can't do it. It doesn't have the power to do that. So those decisions seem logical, even if they're disappointing. But at the end of the day, I think your line in your notes here is pretty much like the thing that sums it all up. It's like a watered down game just so it can be on the Wii. And there were a lot of Wii versions of games that were like that because, you know, devs were caught between this rock and a hard place of the Wii is selling tons and tons and tons and tons of units, so we want to make games for that, but it's not HD, it doesn't have nearly comparable power to the competition, and the 360 is selling tons and tons and tons and tons of units, so we also want to make games for that, but it's like the game, the way the platforms are so vastly different that it's like, how do we do this? So it's like, well, I guess, put all our resources into a big AAA 360 game and then kind of see how we can make it work on the Wii was the idea there.
Right, and like I make a note on this too because there's a couple other things like when I was digging into this. They use pre-rendered videos to replace like the cutscenes from the game, which, you know, in a sense makes sense. But like when like the game itself on the 360, like they go through the cutscenes and it keeps your character's looks basically with like the stupid costumes that you can really like take the seriousness out of that moment because I'm wearing a very not like fit for the scenario outfit kind of thing. Like, you know, I've got a Mega Buster at one point in the game versus like how it is in the Wii where it's effectively like, oh, we just recorded on like what it is without any actual changes and then just threw that in there because we can only handle like what 480p videos or something like that, whatever it is that it was. And like on top of that too, it's like the missions were also more structured. It wasn't like as open of a game too. They would give you like, here's your objective, kind of like almost it would be in like a, I would almost argue like in a like a railgun shooter, kind of like what you had mentioned with like those other Capcom games with like Umbrella Chronicles and Darkside Chronicles, where it's like, here's the mission, you got to go do this, and it's not nearly as like open. It feels more linear, which is not what a Dead Rising game feels like to me. So when I say it's a watered down game to just put it on the Wii, it kind of goes back to what you were talking about with your game, where it's like, why wouldn't I just go play the regular game instead of getting it for this system that it's clearly not meant to be a part of necessarily? And
Right.
I think that's where a lot of problems with ports, like in general, can kind of run into this, because it's like when you're a game company, you have to really like look into the logical decision making of, does it make sense to put this on a system that maybe isn't as strong as what we're intending it for, or you're looking at it in a sense of like, what's the best way that we can reach the largest amount of player base given what we're trying to do. And like I am not claiming to be an expert at any of this case. Like, I'm sure that there is a lot of decision making when it comes to certain games, and especially for like, I can only imagine what it's like for like modern indie developers now. It's like you got to really figure out what you want to put things on so that you try to get the most eyes on it, like just to get people to play your game. So like, you know, the couple examples that we have, it's like I'm sure there were plenty of discussions on that whole front. I don't know if this was necessarily a Capcom decision. Maybe it was a Nintendo one. I don't know who, you know, was initially pursuing this as like a whole option. But like, I'm sure that people were trying to figure out a way to be like, oh yeah, well the Wii has these games too. And it's like, right, but that's not what your main selling point is. It's like you're trying to get into another market that you don't really need. It's like, I think that's kind of where I feel many ports kind of struggle with. Like, it's not saying there aren't good ports, like in general, like even if it's on like a weirder system, but when you start to get into a point of like, do we really need to have it on this system, or are we just doing it just to say that we did it? Because, like, you know, hang on, I'm going to look something up quick. But if you want to interject here.
Yeah, well, I guess where I would push back is, like, I think compared to, like, Pac-Man Party 3D, there's a little bit more logic to this, you know? Okay, well, the Wii's got a sizable audience. It's not like just because it's a casual system doesn't mean there aren't any quote-unquote hardcore gamers on there. So there is a sensible reason to be like, you know, we could make a version of this game for the Wii, but I also think there's something to be said for, like, well, because Capcom actually, and I mean developers in general, but especially Capcom, have done this for a long time. Back in the 90s, you know, they made Final Fight, and a late release NES game was Mighty Final Fight. But that's a totally, it isn't just a version of Final Fight for the NES. it's its own original game in the series. So it's like bringing the series over to the NES, but it's making a totally unique new game that fits what the system can do. God, I can't remember the exact name of the game, but there was one big, I believe it was a 360 exclusive, but either way, it was like a big 7th gen game that Capcom made that didn't do very well. But then they made a like sequel, or I guess it's technically more of a prequel to the game, as if like basically the idea was supposed to be like, we're going to make this DSi download version of the game, and the idea is let's pretend like this has always been some kind of bigger series, and it's like this is the NES game before we made this bigger vial. And ironically, the DSi game is the one that people remember a lot better than the big 360 game. Here's what it is. Dark Void Zero. So like Dark Void on the 7th gen consoles, people are kind of like, about. But then the DSi game, it's not like it took the world by storm, but people ended up enjoying it better than the next gen game. So like sometimes something like this works out. But I don't know that Dead Rising for the Wii is necessarily one of them, because even though they did like it's Dead Rising chop till you drop. So it's like it's a different version of the game. But I think, if anything, what they really should have done is kind of like what you mentioned, like with Umbrella Chronicles, although I think that one might not be the best example. But point is...
No, I think actually, like, I kind of like where you're going with that, because, like, I feel like Dead Rising could have benefited as a light gun shooter, like an arcade-style shooter, like, you know, those games, or, like, Time Splitters or something like that, where, like, as you're going through the mall and you're shooting down zombies, you get all these, like, different items, and then at a certain point, like, you can combine them somehow, and then, like, it kind of makes that experience still feel Dead Rising, at least. Because, like, we're talking about a game that literally you can, like, have knives basically fused with boxing gloves and just start doming zombies in the most absolutely unnecessarily violent way. So I think that's something that, like, maybe Capcom back then could have looked more into, is it's like, you know, they want to make it come off as, like, this, like, serious game, but, like, part of Dead Rising's charm has always been the humor, that whether it's intentional or unintentional, it's always funny to me to see what kind of costumes people will put in for, like, the cutscenes for, like, the original Dead Rising. It's like, we just got Frank in his skivvies the entire time as he's, like, getting in the middle of this shootout in the food court. It's like, what is happening? Like...
Yeah, but I think my point is, and this is why I was saying, I don't know that Umbrella Chronicles is the perfect example, because I can't remember if it was that one or if it's a different one, but one of those is just like, this is Resident Evil 1, but it's a light gun shooter. Whereas I'm thinking maybe it would have made more sense for Dead Rising here is like, because it's trying to be the original Dead Rising, but a different game. I'm saying, be your different game, know what your limitations are for the Wii, and make the best game you can with that, but have it have its own original, like, spin-off story. Let it be its own wholly original game instead of... Like, I guess I'm saying, instead of start from the premise of we need to make Dead Rising 1 for the Wii, start from the premise of we need to make a Wii Dead Rising game. So,
right.
Did you get an answer to your question that you were looking up, by the way?
Shockingly, yes. So, I was looking because I wanted to see what the legacy sales were for this game. And VG Charts has a listing on here. I'm also shocked by the review scores on this, where it kind of is anywhere between like a 6.5 to like a 7.5, give or take. I'm like, that's wild, because that does not sound like a game that would get that high of marks. But like, if I'm doing the math right, it looks like it was about 290,000 in sales overall since it released. And I'm talking like overall legacy sales. So like, this is a game that did not sell well, and I think for obvious reasons. apparently like they have like a thing on here that kind of lists some other stuff too. Like they have like the same engine that the RE4 Wii edition was on, which makes total sense when you look at it. And there also was a mention of like there were new enemies exclusive to this game, and the only reason I like, oh yeah, that's right, was when I was looking up gameplay video of this to kind of like get a refresher. There's zombie poodles in this game, which is not two words I would ever fuse together, but it's like it's the like. Have you ever played the first Dead Rising?
I haven't personally played it, but I will say it's actually one that's kind of interested me for a while, because I've seen like all the wacky costumes. Like you can wear the serve bot like from Mega Man Legends in it.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, I like the humor with it. Like it seems like a charming game.
It is, but like I think the big thing with it is it's like Dead Rising has kind of had an identity crisis through the series, and I'll get into that in a sec. I just want to finish the point before I forget it. The zombie poodles, I'm pretty sure, are the same poodle like in-game model that they use for like the beginning like cutscene where like this. So in the game, when you get in the mall, you see like a bunch of survivors kind of like at the front door, and there's a bunch of zombies that are like they're locked out, but like the front door is basically barricaded, and this older woman is like freaking out because her dog's missing, and the dog is outside, so she starts unlocking the door and removing the barricades, letting all the zombies in, and then of course she dies. But like somehow in the game, from what I remember of the first one on like 360 and that, the dog doesn't die. Like they just kind of ignore it. But then it's like in Chop Till You Drop, there's suddenly zombie poodles, and I'm like, this is such a weird thing to see like in like existence now. It's like I know like there's certain zombie movies that have, and like certain games in particular, like the RE4 dogs come to mind. Something that's like really, sticks out is actually like memorable of a video game enemy for zombie games. And I'm like, thinking in my head, thinking to the zombie dogs in RE versus the zombie poodle that looks like it just got dirty. Like there's not even like anything really saying that like, oh yeah, this is a zombie. It's like, this just looks like it rolled in some dirt.
It's a zombie in air quotes.
Pretty much. Like I'm willing to bet that it was partially because it's like, oh, well, we have the model, so it's like we might as well use it. And something that I think that, kind of going back to what I was originally saying before I had to bring up the zombie poodles point, Dead Rising, I feel like, has always had like this kind of weird identity crisis as like the series has continued. The first two games really hit home like what I would say Dead Rising is. It's this game that it's supposed to be taking like what seems like a really serious story for like a plot, but the player really has the ability to really make it silly. It's not saying that like they won't take it seriously in some cases, but it's like when both the first two games let you basically dress up however you want, and they'll carry that over into cutscenes, and it's like, oh, so and so is wearing a diaper with a Mega Man Buster. I'm already invested into this, but not in the way you would think. And then, like, as it kind of progressed, it went less into the silly route, and it was trying to make itself more, like, serious. Because, like, 3 was really serious for some reason, and then 4 kind of tried to go back a little bit on it. And then they even brought Frank West back for 4. But, like, it's just so weird because it's, like, it's one of those series that I feel like Capcom has kind of struggled with to really, like, give it its own identity. But it's weird because it's, like, I feel like it found the identity really early on, and then they just sort of wanted to leave it in the dust for some reason. I don't know how to better describe it than that. So, like,
I think the identity for the series, kind of when you put it all together like that, there's a lot of people who, like, they love horror games, but a big part of what they love about some horror games, especially old Japanese horror games, is, oh, you beat the game and you get this bonus super dumb, silly costume, like you pointed out, and you can play it through the whole game. And it's like they love it not just because it's scary and they enjoy the gameplay, but it's like because they can make it dumb. And I think that's kind of the charm of Dead Rising is You can play it totally straight if you want to, but the way to really make it fun is to do stuff to make it dumb. Let me defeat the zombies, like you said, with a shopping cart. Because why not? Let me go around and...
Or what's the one? There's like a combo weapon in the game where it's like... No, I think this is in Dead Rising 2. But you can literally make a combo weapon that is a kayak paddle with 2 chainsaws duct taped at the ends.
Let me make a wacky weapon, and let me do it while just being in my main character's underwear.
Right.
That's the idea. And the more serious you try to make it, the less that starts to work. And so then you're right. Then you lose the identity.
And that's kind of what I think a lot of people had a gripe with Dead Rising 4 was it was like they tried to kind of go back because like 4 actually goes back to the same location that the first game was with the same protagonist, but it's still trying to carry over that more darker tone while still trying to find elements of humor in it. It's like, no, the humor is like the best way to describe it was Dead Rising is like kind of that B-movie horror flick where it's like, yeah, on paper this is a serious story, but the way that it's being acted out, the way that it's being treated, it's not as serious as it's being made out to be. So like that's where the enjoyment is. It's like, when you watch kind of like a B-movie flick where it's like, it's not like pure amazing cinema, but you're still gonna have a good time with it. Is the best way. It's the zombie B movie of video game franchises.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summation of it. Man, we've been really good at just summarizing things into like really short descriptions today.
Shockingly. But I would probably say we might have to cut this one a little bit shorter just because I've still got plans that I gotta do later. For my own little America birthday celebration.
It is a holiday, so yes, listeners, I hope you will excuse us for cutting this a little bit short. But we've done a lot of these topics too, where it's like they have potential for like later revisits. So I think we have like good examples of stuff that could perhaps make a good revisit, if I could enunciate for this topic. But yeah, I agree. It's probably a good idea to cut it off here if you have stuff you need to do.
Right. So, I mean, we'll definitely have to revisit this more, like, because I'm sure there's more ports that we haven't even thought of, or games like, how on earth is this on this system? Like, I really want to kind of dig deeper into, like, the Call of Duties on, like, the DS, just to kind of really be like, I really need to know why this was made. I really need to know.
I think I have an answer for you, but I think it would also maybe be more interesting to actually investigate those than just leave it to our one-word answer to that question.
What's the answer? 'Cause that's it. That's the whole thing.
I was going to say money.
Well, right. But that's a topic for a different day.
If you did enjoy this episode, though, I would love to have found out how you did enjoy it. Maybe you could show your enjoyment through liking the episode, if that's something that your platform of choice happens to let you do. Maybe you could do so through leaving a comment on this episode. We actually got a couple comments on our previous episode where we ranked our Mario Kart tracks, including from a returning commenter who had to point out that he is also a huge Double Dash fan, so you've got another person in your army.
Oh, I'm fully aware of who it is.
It's
like I was looking through the comments on that one, actually.
Oh, well then I guess I don't need to explain it here. You've already read it.
Well,
but either way...
It's just funny, because that's my cousin.
Oh.
Like, he and I have been playing a lot of Nintendo stuff over the years, so, like, we more or less kind of grew up in the same, like, methodology of, like, our tastes, I think. So
yeah,
it's definitely one of those, like, when he was like, oh yeah, I'm a big Double Dash fan, I'm like, I know. I know.
You don't need to tell me, I already know.
It's like, surprise, I've already been aware of this.
It's funny to kind of put the bow on the entire thing. That's something that I've been thinking about this week in relation to the first 30 minutes of this episode. I get the feeling Mario Kart World is going to be kind of like Mario Kart Double Dash, in that it's a bit of a polarizing game. Some people really love it, Some people really don't care for it. It's way too early to be thinking about anything like that, considering, again, it'll have been out for a month as of tomorrow. But that's just kind of the vibe I'm getting from the game.
I'd give it a vibe check, but I don't really have a way actually have an answer on that one just yet, so...
Well, we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But to finish our conclusion here, if you want to do any of those engagements, I would love to do it. I would especially love a message at speakpipe.com/endless conversation loop. The inbox is only so far collecting dust and cobwebs, but maybe one day it can collect an audio message. I would love to have that.
Yeah, you guys can do all the social things. You can comment, a like, post, subscribe, everything in between there. I don't know how this all works, and I've been on the internet for how long?
But with that, I think it's time for us to sign out. So I am Brandon.
And I am Boom.
And we will talk to you yet again in a couple of weeks. And yeah, if you're in the US, even though you'll get this way after the holiday, hopefully you've had a pleasant, or as pleasant as you can, 4th of July.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.